I got a gentleman backstage now that I want to tell you about because quite a tremendous story behind him. And I think his story is going to be one that rings true for a lot of us. It kind of starts like this. He was getting older. I can relate to that. Can any of us relate to that? Yeah. And he hit the age of 50. And he noticed his health was declining, and conventional medicine, surprise, surprise, was sort of doing nothing to help. So he was a practicing physician. He's been doing it for 25 years. He's a renowned cardiologist and visionary. And he said, you know what? Let's try something else. So he switched and began to really double down on functional medicine, age management, and he became one of the leading speakers. After it led to a remarkable reversal of his own fortunes, he became one of the leading speakers about this that travels all over planet Earth right now, telling people about longevity and about not only about longevity, but about the vitality you can have that goes with it. He's got a new book on Amazon. It's a bestseller. It is called 100 is the New 30. And so he's here to tell you about how you can live longer and how you can feel better while you're doing it. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Gladden.
Thank you. Thanks, man. Okay. It's good to be here. So, who wants to live young for a lifetime? Okay, good. We're on the same page. I'm going to do this talk in two parts. The first part is going to be a little bit of information that you haven't heard yet today. And the second half, I'm going to create an experience for you that I think you'll find very, very interesting. And then I'm going to share some insights around that. I may actually demarcate the two halves of the talk with a joke. And we'll see how that goes, but let's get started. So, see if I push this. There we go. Okay. So this idea of living young for a lifetime, you know, when you think about longevity, people talk about, I want to be 100, I want to be 120, I want to be 150, I want to be 180, I'm going to live to 360, I want to be 720, I want to be immortal, right? All of these things are in the conversation, quite honestly, yeah, and very seriously. And yet, when I think about that, and maybe when you think about that, it's very abstract. What does it even mean to be 120? What's it mean to be 150, right? And every picture I ever see of somebody that's 117 or 122, that's not exactly what I'm going for, right? Not exactly what I'm going for. And I don't think it's what you're going for either. But we do know what it is to be young. We do know what it is to be vital, right? We do know what it is to be youthful and enjoy life from a youthful perspective. And so it dawned on me that really true longevity, in part, is going to be living young for a lifetime, right? And so to that end, I wake up 27 every day. 27 every day. So you're looking at a 27-year-old guy. Good. You're looking good for your ages too, right? And I'll explain that to you a little bit more here in a minute. So when I'm 100 years old, my goal is to have a 30-year-old body, right? 30-year-old body. And if I'm going to have a 30-year-old body when I'm 100, then I need to have that today. And I'm 27 today because I had a birthday. I was born in 1954 in February. I'll let you do the math on that. My next decade, I'll be 28. The next decade after that, 29. When I'm 100, I'll turn 30, okay? So I want to have a 30-year-old body when I'm 100, right? And the other thing I want to have is a 300-year-old mind, right? All the wisdom, all the equanimity, all the perspective, all the sense of peace that comes with a 300-year-old mind. And if I'm going to have a 300-year-old mind when I'm 100, then I need to be doing that today. I need to be catching up to a 200-year-old mind, a 250-year-old mind, right? And I think you're going to see that this is such a key piece in this whole longevity equation. So I'll give you a little bit of my background. You heard a little bit here, but my background was interventional cardiology, right? I went to good schools, Temple University, Case Western for internal medicine, University of Colorado for my cardiology. I went down to Texas in 1988 and started practicing. The reason I went there was because there's a lot of chicken fried steak eating, tobacco chewing folks in Texas, and I thought, well, this is my promised land. I want to go down there, right? And while I was down there, I ended up doing a lot of things in the cardiology space. I ended up starting my own heart group. I ended up with 10 offices and 12 doctors, and we flew around in a little A36 Bonanza, kind of like what you would expect in Texas. We started cath labs and heart attack programs, and I had a lot of outreach. I had a lot of passion for people that didn't want to drive to the big city, but wanted to access quality care. And so we created clinics and we created services in many of these outlying areas. And then I had the opportunity to co-found what's become a nationally recognized heart hospital in Dallas. And the reason we did that, myself and other cardiologists and the people at Baylor, was because we were asking a different question. When people were suffering from a heart attack or the need for bypass or a stent or a pacemaker, it's a very existential moment for those people, incredibly existential, right? They're facing their mortality. And we felt like the hospitals were not doing a good job of enabling those people to have a patient-centric and family-centric kind of care. And so we designed a hospital that not only was incredibly efficient for the physicians and the nurses to work in, but where the rooms were so big that family members could sleep in the rooms at night with the patients, that the clergy would be there that would come by and minister to them. All these different things were there. And it really, from there, blew up into being incredibly successful. Now it has several branches, it does tons of research, and again, it's nationally recognized. What I learned from that is that in life, you only get the answers to the questions that you're asking, right? You only get the answers to the questions that you're asking. We started to ask a different question. How do we actually create a better experience for the patient? So I was doing that. I also got involved with medical device companies. I still sit on the board of one that makes interventional wires and guide wires and catheters for neurology, basically, to stop strokes. So I'm still involved with that. But something happened to me in my 50s. So in my 50s, all of a sudden, I started putting on weight. I'd been an athlete my whole life. I played soccer in college, and I played basketball in high school and a little bit in college. I had started mountain biking and snowboarding, skiing, all these different activities, body surfing, then surfing. And in my 50s, all of a sudden, I was waking up exhausted all the time. I mean, it didn't matter if I slept 8 hours, 10 hours, I was exhausted. And on top of that, when I would become mentally stressed, I would feel myself going over a cliff of depression, right? Not the kind of depression you could talk yourself out of, like, well, you know, I'll feel better tomorrow, or let me just talk to a good friend or go for a run. It wasn't that kind of depression. It was just like, man, I just want out of here, right? I mean, it was deep. And my father had suffered with dementia later in life. And I was starting to develop brain fog also. On top of that, I'm putting on weight like I'd never put on before. And so at that point, I went into my local colleagues and I said, hey, what's going on here? And they ran their battery of tests and they came back and they said, you know, everything checks out to be normal for your age, right? You're just getting older. Why don't you take an antidepressant, right? Talk about another existential moment. That was an existential moment for me. I couldn't believe I'd hit the zenith of my life, right? My kids had never been able to keep up with me. Now I was struggling to keep up with them. And I'm like, no. I can't make peace with this, right? That's when I threw myself into the functional integrative age management medicine space. 2.5 years later, I'd actually figured everything out. If I had the same data in front of me today, we could figure it out in 4 minutes, right? 4 minutes, but it took us 2.5 years back then. And what I came to realize was that I was so exhausted because I had subclinical hypothyroidism. All my blood work looked normal. It was only when my reflexes were tested and were very slow that I realized that I was hypothyroid. On top of that, genetically, I don't convert inactive thyroid to active thyroid in my brain efficiently. I am homozygous for that SNP where I don't convert it. So that's about a 70% reduction. So when I got on the right combination of T4 and T3, inactive thyroid, all of a sudden the lights came on. I was like, wow, I feel great again. This is amazing. And then I was going through andropause. Women go through menopause, men go through andropause. I was low on testosterone, DHEA. Once I got those hormones dialed in, I lost 20 pounds of fat, put on 10 pounds of muscle, right? And the brain fog and the depression was due to the fact that genetically, I don't make certain neurotransmitters very efficiently, right? My methylation cycle doesn't work very well. And once I figured out the right way to adjust the methylation cycle with the supplements, things like that I was doing, some things I wasn't doing, all of a sudden it was like I could come under lots of stress and I wouldn't get depressed. And I also took up meditation. And that made such a massive difference for me also. So all of a sudden, 2.5 years later, I feel like, wow, I'm really back. My kids can't keep up with me again. This is how life is supposed to be. And at that point, I realized I'd been practicing sick care, not health care, and I left. I base jumped, really. I know how to make a living as a cardiologist. I had no idea how to make a living outside of that, but I knew my heart of hearts I had to do this. And so I base jumped basically out of cardiology into health optimization is what it started with. And from there, it's grown into Gladden Longevity. And back to the questions that we ask, the question I started to ask myself at that point was, gosh, I wonder how good I can be. How good can I be? How fit? How strong? How mentally sharp? How relationally replete? How spiritually connected? How good can life be? How big of an impact can I make, right? And so when I left, that was the question that was driving my forward progress. We've since added 3 other questions. One is, how do we make 100 the new 30? How do you actually do that? You'll never get the answers to the questions you're not asking, right? So that's the question we ask every day. How do we make 100 the new 30? How do we live young for a lifetime? That's a mindset question. I'm 27. I am young, right? And then how do we crack the Hayflick limit? You know, Dr. Hayflick back in the 50s described that when cells in a petri dish would divide, they would divide up to 55 or 60 times and they would always die out. The thought was, well, geez, if we just get the medium right, if we just get the agar better, if we just put in the right nutrients, they won't die out. They always died out. And it wasn't until the 90s when they discovered that it was telomere shortening inside those cells that caused them to become senescent and die. Nobel Prize was awarded for that, that they figured out why the cells were dying, right? So how do we actually crack the code on the Hayflick limit? The Hayflick limit for a human would run us out to about 120, which is about as long as you see people live. How do we actually crack that code, right? So that's the 4th question that we're asking. And I can tell you that in my practice, we literally have thousands of answers. We have virtually every technology you can think of, and if we don't, we have access to it. We go down the rabbit hole with everybody on so many things, it's amazing. But we're not married to any single technology, not a single one. We're only married to those questions. So that's me in the backdrop. This is me being athletic. That's me practicing interventional cardiology. This is my kids, my son, 2 of my daughters, and there's more kids in the picture. But the idea is that, you know, having relationships, having activity, having things that you want to live young for is really critical. I've got 5 grandchildren now, right? And I want to be snowboarding with them. I want to be surfing with them. I want to be teaching them how to fly fish like my dad taught me, right? So this is what it is to live young for a lifetime. If that resonates with you, then reframe your question. It's not about how do I grow old. That's not what this is about. It's not about how do I grow old gracefully. What does that even mean? What does it mean to grow old gracefully, right? I think that's like making peace with loss is basically what that comes down to, right? Being gracious about loss. I don't want that. I don't really want that. I don't want that for you either, right? I don't think we have to go down that path. So I think we're really in a new paradigm of aging. And I'm going to share a couple things with you. I'm not going to repeat any of the things essentially that you've heard before. And then when we finish this part of the talk, as I mentioned, I'm going to take you through an experience. So the power of claiming a young age. So I'd like each of you to actually think about if you could be any age that you could choose, what age would you want to be for the rest of your life? Now, in my case, I want to be 27 now. I want to be 30 when I'm 100, right? And I have reasons for that. I was very active. I was in medical school at 27, incredibly curious, learning at a fast rate. you know, just loving life, loving the experience of all of that, right? And I feel like I'm right there now, right? So pick an age that you really resonate with and claim that age. I can tell you that the power of claiming that age transcends almost anything that you can imagine. So for example, if I wake up and I don't feel 27, right? Let's say something happened. I hurt my knee, I had a crash on my mountain bike, something like that. I wake up and I don't feel 27. I never ever say, oh yeah, but you're good for your age. You know, you're better than most. I never acquiesce to that. That's acquiescing to the aging process. As soon as you acquiesce, it's over. When I wake up and I'm 27 and I don't feel 27, when you wake up and you don't feel the age that you're claiming, the question you then ask is, how do I get back to that age? Not how do I make peace with the age that I'm at? Can you see the power in that? I can tell you that it has pulled me out of so many situations where it's like, oh my gosh, I had 4 injuries not long ago. I won't recount to you all the different, I'm very active, right? So I had a couple mountain bike crashes. I had a crash on elliptigo and a couple other things. And I felt pretty beat up and I'm like, is this it? Is it now time for me to say, well? And I thought, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. And here I am, I feel great again, right? But if I'd gone down that path, I would have started to limp around and whatever else. So the power of claiming that young age is just unfathomably important for you. So make that your first action item here. So what's your target, right? We talked about that. And then the power of developing a 30-year-old body and a 300-year-old mind. So what's your target for longevity, right? I mean, we've been talking about longevity, but why? Why do you want to live a long time, right? What are you going to do with that? Particularly if you're young, right? And what's the target that you have? So we're going to talk a lot about that. For me, it's this 30-year-old body, 300-year-old mind. I will expand on that. But think about that for yourself. You know, what do I really want to do? And what if my body is this age that I want to be, how do I want my life, my mind, my relationships and everything to expand? So I feel like there are a lot of misconceptions about aging, and I feel like we're the victim of misconceptions. So the first one is that we sense and feel that aging is actually linear, right? Every year it's another birthday. I don't feel that much different. I don't feel that much different. And yet, we know it's exponential. Aging is exponential. You see it all around us. We age so much more between 70 and 80, 80 and 90, than we do between 20 and 30, 30 and 40, 40 and 50, right? So much faster. And yet, we sort of mollify ourselves saying, yeah, I'm good, right? I'm good. That's like a death knell. So we're in an exponential game. Agreed? It's an exponential game that we're playing. And yet, we relate to it from a linear perspective. Humans have a hard time. Peter Diamandis did a good job of explaining to us in abundance that we have a very hard time relating to exponential processes as humans. We're very linear thinkers. So I want you to think about the urgency of this as well, because you're in an exponential game. No matter where you are chronologically, you're in an exponential game. And so you need to have an exponential strategy, not a linear strategy. So there are tremendous limitations to this idea of preventative medicine, right? Preventative medicine, wellness medicine, to me is an incredibly weak word. It's a word I actually never use because in wellness, it's basically someone applying sick care technologies to see if you have evidence of disease, and if you don't, they declare you well, and then they basically tell you to eat better and exercise more, we'll see you back in a year, right? That's the wellness approach, and that's supposed to be preventative. For me, that falls so far short, it's almost like watching the natural history of aging unfold, right? And all of the executive physicals, we've had people come to us from all of the programs, and they all say, oh my gosh, what you do here is so far beyond what they're even thinking about. But what they see there is that they're just marking time for them, right? Just marking time. And that's not what you need. You need an exponential strategy. So this is an exponential strategy that we've developed. And it's basically formulated around 4 circles. There's a life energy circle, a longevity circle, a health circle, a performance circle. And all of these are written about in great detail in the book. The book is 450 pages. It's actually well written to the point where you can read and understand it, but it's also very in-depth, right? Now, we won't have time to go into all of that in this talk, but the point is there are 4 circles that are delineated there. And there's a 5th circle that I've added also, and I'll show you that in just a minute. But the idea of an exponential strategy, you have to have all of these areas covered before you can actually start to move forward on your plan and path to longevity. And it all begins with foundational science, right? So we're sourcing foundational science at a rapid rate. We use AI to source it for us. Now we're using AI to read and condense papers for us. We've been using this for 4 or 5 years, right? So we have tons of information funneling into us. If we don't know about something, we go find out about it. And from that, we've identified that there are levers that basically reside on these circles. And the levers need to be pulled. But particularly on the longevity circle, they don't all need to be pulled all the time, right? As Mark Hyman was talking about, when it comes to balancing mTOR and AMPK, you're either on one side of the teeter-totter or the other, but you're not on both at the same time. So there's actually a timing, a sequence, there's a frequency and intensity and duration with which those levers get pulled. It's very symphonic, which is why the subtitle of the book is How Playing the Symphony of Longevity Will Enable Us to Live Young for a Lifetime. And so those levers exist, and once we know what the levers are, then we do testing. Now, we do very extensive testing. We literally send labs around the world, and we've been using Vibrant ever since I heard about Vibrant when they first came to market in 2015, 14, whenever they got to Texas. And so we love their testing, but we use lots of different tests, right? And to that end, once we identify what somebody has, and what I mean by that is we have to first understand their genetics. And if you don't know your genetics, you're in an exponential game and you don't even know the cards you're holding yet, right? So getting your genetics done allows you to have the cards played out so you know what cards you're holding, right? And none of us have perfect genetics. I've never seen anybody yet. All of us have challenges. All of us have assets. So you've got to do testing to understand what your genetics are. And then you've got to do testing to understand where you are in the aging process, right? We've heard about biological age and chronological age. What I'd like to tell you is that there is no one biological age. We are a mosaic of many, many ages. What we've seen is that you have a brain age, a heart age, a skin age, a blood vessel age, a telomeric age, a mitochondrial age, a DNA methylation age in the blood, in the urine. You have a rate of aging. You have an omics age. You have a symphony of omics aging. You have an immune system age, right? You have eye ages and ear ages. When you think about it, you are a mosaic of many, many ages. And I don't want you to ever be duped into thinking, well, I had a test done. Somebody came around and they did a lab for me and they ran it through an algorithm and said, oh, you know what? Your biological age is 5 years younger than your chronological age. And you think, oh, well, great, I must be great. In actual fact, for me, my toughest thing is my kidney age. When I was 5 years old, I had a strep throat. The antibodies from the strep throat attacked my kidneys. It's called post-streptococcal glomerulonephritis. And basically, I have damaged a left kidney, right? So my ability to filter blood is lower than I would like it to be. We'll regenerate it at some point, but it's still lower. And I'm only as young as my oldest age, right? And for each of you, you're only as young as your oldest age. So you really want to define not only the cards you're holding, but where are you? Where are you in the game, right? Remember, it's an exponential game. And then from there, we prescribe actions. So the actions cover an array of everything that you've heard about, anything you can think about, from regenerative procedures to air purifiers to EMF, filters, to everything you can think about is involved in actions. And then we use feedback loops, right? Wearables, conversations with people, repeat testing. And when you put all that together, Now you're actually developing an exponential strategy. You know the cards you're holding, you know where you are in the game, you know the things you need to work on, you know where your assets lie, right? If you were running a business, right, this is how you would run the business. You would want to, what are the assets? What are the liabilities? You know, what's the marketing doing? What cards do we have here? What products do we have, right? You'd want to know all this so that you could actually develop a strategy that was a winning strategy. And I'm just simply encouraging you to do the same thing when you think about longevity and have a real target, right? And a company, you might say, well, we want to get to X dollars of sales, or, you know, X dollars of money in the bank, or whatever metrics you want to use. Well, here, this is why it's so important to identify what are your targets? What biological age do you want to be at, right? And what psychospiritual age do you want to have? What mind age do you want to have? So, very, very important. So, these 4 circles are actually interrelated this way also. And, you know, typically what happens for us is, you see the life energy circle is the one that binds them all, but typically what happens is if somebody starts to feel their own mortality, right? They don't look like they want to, they don't feel like they want to, they can't do what they want to, then they're at a decision point. Either they say, well, I guess I'm just getting older, and they acquiesce. Or they say, no, I don't like that. I'm going to get healthy again. And when they make that decision to get healthy again, they get healthy again. And you see the health circle right there. And they eat better, and they exercise, and they work out, and they sleep better, and they manage their stress, and they do some things like this. But I have to tell you, you can't get to longevity without that, but it by itself is a linear strategy to an exponential problem. It is not enough. Everybody that ever ate better, exercised, detoxed, did saunas, they all got old and died. All of them, right? So don't kid yourself that linear approach on either side. Don't kid yourself that, number one, it's not important because it's vital, but don't kid yourself that it's enough because it's not. So when you understand that, then you understand that, well, if you start to basically address longevity, and I'll show you what we mean by that, and performance and life energy, now you're starting to develop this exponential strategy. So this is the life energy circle, and I'm going to go through this in more detail a little later in the talk, but I just want to point out to you that it's based on a growth mindset, optimizing mental health, feeling loved, optimizing relational health, feeling joy, spiritual connection, feeling worthy, optimizing wisdom and feeling safe, and this energetic resonance with the universe, this greater sense of purpose. This is the psychospiritual life energy circle, if you will. And then there's the longevity circle. This is where it's really important to understand that there are 3 different kinds of medicine. There's the medicine that I was trained in, which is symptom-driven medicine, right? It basically sits on the surface. Nobody came to see me as a cardiologist unless they were having symptoms. Guarantee you, nobody ever did. So it's symptom-driven sick care is what it was. It wasn't health care, it was sick care. You only came to me if you were sick. Then below that, you have functional medicine, right? Integrative functional medicine. Wonderful, great, saved my life, right? And yet, that's root cause medicine. And the root cause it's looking for is the root cause of the problem. You have eczema. Okay, well, let's see what your food sensitivities are. Let's fix your leaky gut. All of a sudden, your rash goes away. So we're not treating the eczema with a cream and a salve. We're not treating the symptom. We're actually going to the root cause. Great. Beautiful. But you have to understand there's a level of medicine below functional medicine, and that's called longevity medicine. Longevity medicine is focused on what's actually driving the aging process in the first place. And you've heard several speakers talk about the hallmarks of aging. Well, the hallmarks of aging could be construed as either both phenotypic expressions of aging, in other words, the expressions of aging, and also as drivers of aging, right? So a senescent cell forming is an expression of the aging process, but the senescent cell itself accelerates aging, right? So it's both a phenotypic expression and a driver. And if you're working with longevity medicine, you're now looking at the actual drivers of aging. So imagine that we're all in the Niagara River and we're headed towards the falls, right? And so we don't want to go over the falls, right? So sick care would say, well, we feel fine, right? So we're not going to do anything yet. Functional medicine would say, well, the current's picking up, let's put a motor on the boat. Longevity medicine would say, what can we do to create an anti-gravity machine that allows us to move the river back upstream? You see the difference, right? It's root cause of the root cause. Longevity medicine is the root cause of the root cause. And that's what's so critical to look at. So things like telomere shortening, we know that they don't correspond to biological age nearly as neatly as we thought they might, but they're still critical. Short telomeres associated with cancer and death. Mitochondrial function, mitophagy. The ability of proteins to be made properly, folded properly, and disposed of properly, absolutely critical. Cross-linking of proteins with sugar molecules, right? Glycation, this comes from our diet, another hallmark of aging. Oncogenic potential. I think the thing most of us fear in here, even more than heart disease, is cancer, right? And we know that heart disease is a chronic disease, but it's like, well, I just have heart disease, I can deal with that. Cancer, oh man, right? I don't want cancer. So understanding, again, your genetics, what's your predisposition, right? Do you have a predisposition for cancer? Where are you? Are you doing adequate testing? I can tell you that imaging, doing a pro novo full body MRI scan, is no way to test for cancer. You have to have a tumor that's pretty good size before you'd ever pick it up on an MRI scan, right? And the Grail test, you may as well just flush it down the toilet. They were just forced to publish some data that showed that for stage 1 cancers, their ability to detect cancer is down around 3%. It's a useless test. We've known it was useless from the time it came out. It gained so much popularity, but it's a useless test. There are so much better ways to test for cancer, looking for circulating tumor cells. And there are tests coming online that will blow everything we have out of the water in the next 6 months. It's going to be amazing. It's really, really cool stuff. We'll be able to see cancer before you even have clinical cancer. Do you have malignant cells? Not cancer, but you have malignant cells. We can treat you then before you ever develop cancer, right? Why wait? So oncogenic potential, DNA repair, critical. We heard about sirtuins and how important they are for DNA repair and activation of sirtuins. Microbiome and gut health. This is now actually a hallmark of aging. The microbiome shifts as we age. How do we shift it back? It's a combination of prebiotics, probiotics, and postbiotics, right? Postbiotics are basically what the healthy bacteria make that nourish the environment. Probiotics stimulate bacteria to grow. And prebiotics are like the fertilizers that feed all of it. But you'll never clean the gut up until you clear out the infections and heal up the leaky gut. So when you clean up the gut, it's got to be a full-blown scope of practice, so to speak. You can't just do it with, oh, I'll take a probiotic and that should get it done. Okay, so I just want you to be aware of that. It's doable, but it takes some work. Epigenetic rate of aging. We heard about the Dunedan pace. So this is a test that's been well validated for looking at the rate of aging. You should understand it's also one of the tests that you can impact the quickest. So if you make lifestyle changes, you can go from, aging 1 year biologically for every year you're alive down to 0.8 in a matter of weeks, quite honestly. The way you can do that is to fast, right? Do a 5-day fast mimicking diet, cut out the carbs, do this, do that, start exercising, and literally, very quickly that can shift, right? The interesting thing is we have people in our practice that come in with a really great number. They're like 0.8, 0.82, 0.79. And yet when you look at their epigenetic age across their systems, they can be 10 years older. Their systems can be 10 years older. The rate of aging is only showing you the rate of aging. It's not showing you your age. So super important not to be duped by these single numbers and think, oh, everything's wonderful. It may be that everything's wonderful, but you just want to know because you can't fix a company that you don't understand what's happening, right? So, and then there's epigenetic rate of aging. We talked about that. Nutrient sensing, we heard about that. mTOR and AMPK, critical. Then inflammation. Inflammation and oxidative stress drives so much downward spiral. NAD and NADH. One of the beauties of ozone is that it changes the NAD to NADH ratio, which energizes your mitochondria, energizes your cell. Transcriptomics and proteomics. So we've developed testing to actually look at some of these hallmarks that we have no other ways to look at. And I'm excited to collaborate with Vibrant to see if we can actually do some of this testing and expand it so we can actually look further into the real drivers of aging. I think that's the next frontier. And then macromolecular damage. We don't have a great way to measure it. Altered intracellular communication. Don't have a great way to measure it. Cell mechanical property disruption. We don't have a great way to measure it, right? So there's things we have a hard time measuring still. And then stem cell senescence, stem cells dying off. All of us have a supply of very small embryonic-like stem cells in our blood, right? These are truly pluripotent cells. And they're in your blood. They're being held in suspended animation, basically by a protein ligand, right? So they're little, they're tiny. It's hard to see them on a microscope. Dr. Cha down in the San Diego area, Carlsbad area, developed a laser to break that bond. We use it all the time. You break that bond, those very small embryonic-like stem cells in your blood release. Now you can use your own stem cells in conjunction with other things to actually heal what you have. Very, very powerful. And yet we know that stem cells in the fat cells, in the muscle, etc., those are getting older, right? So that's a nice thing for you to know about. Hey, I've got a supply of stem cells that's going to last me. And then messenger RNA splicing dysregulation. I won't go into the details, but it's how proteins get made. They go from DNA to RNA. The RNA doesn't just code for the protein, it actually codes for a bunch of stuff. Sections of the RNA have to be cut out so the protein can be put together properly. And when that dysregulates, you don't get proteins that are actually usable. And then the immune system. This is massive. So when it comes to cancer, right? We work with people with cancer. We have many, many ways to actually make it difficult for a cancer cell to divide. Ultimately, what wins the day in cancer is a youthful immune system. The reason you don't get cancer when you're 25, unless you get a childhood kind of leukemia or something like that, but the reason you don't is your immune system is so robust. And one of the real keys to health is having a robust immune system. So these people that make it to 117, they make it to 120. When you look at the genetic studies on those folks, right, out of Italy and other places, a couple things they find. One, they have genes that actually protect their cardiovascular system. Two, they have genes that protect their immune system. So if you really want to crack the code, you really need to pay attention to your immune system. We have ways to measure the status of the immune system through UCLA. Maybe that's something Vibrant can jump in on as well. But super, super important stuff. And then health, right? So we go through every organ system. We can measure, treat, all these things. And then performance. So performance is critical. So when I'm 100, I want to be fast, agile, strong, quick, balanced, right? With great cardiovascular capacity, recovery, right? And flexibility. That's what I want. So if I'm going to be that when I'm 100, so I can snowboard with my great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids maybe, then I need to be that today, right? So look at yourself. If you're not able to do the age that you claim that you would like to be, use that to motivate you to think about training those things. When you're 18 and you want to get in shape, you lift some weights and go for a run. All good, right? As you go through the decades, you have to understand that what you did the prior decade to keep young and healthy no longer is enough in the following decade, right? What I did in my 30s, what I did in my 20s to be in shape is different than what I had to do in my 30s. When I got to my 40s, I had leveraged my health for the sake of building my cardiology practice and a family. I went out for a run and I could run literally 2 blocks. I played soccer in college. I could run all day, literally all day. 2 blocks, right? So we all tend to leverage our health for the sake of building families, businesses, taking care of things. So important to get that back. And you have to train all these things. You have to train agility. You have to train balance. You have to train quickness and strength, right? All these things have to come into play. When you do that, you can be fast, agile, strong, quick, and balanced. Very, very cool. The last circle is the one about environments. So designing your environments, architecting your environments is key to the success. So once you have a program, let's say once you know the cards you're holding, once you know where you are in the aging process, once you know what you're going to do, then you need to architect the environments. And we all live in four, right? We all live in four: home, work, business, travel, and vacation. That's probably 98% of it right there. And what has happened is we'll have clients that will say, oh, I'm doing great, but then I went to Italy for 3 weeks and the wheels came off, right? So with that, it's like, oh, well, we need to architect what you're going to do on vacation. If you get that architected properly, then you can go on vacation and the wheels won't come off. We heard about resistance band as a hotel room. I don't know if that slipped past you or not, but Mark Hyman was talking about that. I carry resistance bands with me too. I got in a lift this morning and took a ride down to a river close by here and ran along the river for about 3 miles this morning, right? Because I had my sneakers, I had my shorts. I knew I was going to be in California. It was going to be nice to be outside, nice and cool. I'm from Texas. And it's like, I'm going to go for a run, right? If you architect what you're going to do, you can make it happen. So the tornado of aging, what is lost is function, integrity, robustness, and resilience. And with robustness, this is basically your ability to withstand something, right? So if something's robust, an unexpected stress comes in and it's not damaged. Resilience is the ability to recover from damage. And resilience is cut in half every 8 years, right? So think about that, 8 years. Every 8 years, you're half as resilient. That's exponential decline. So you have to build that back up. So these hallmarks of aging, they spin up into a tornado, basically, that accelerates. And the prime movers are genomic instability, telomere attrition, epigenetic changes, mitochondrial dysfunction, inflammation, and oxidative stress. And there's another really interesting thing. The hypothalamus in the brain seems to be a controller, right? Seems to be a controller. It turns out that hypothalamic neuroinflammation and age-related depletion of stem cells in the third ventricle of the brain may be the actual clock that causes aging to start. When those stem cells stop releasing exosomes into the system, the body ages. Experiments done in mice have shown when you destroy those hypothalamic stem cells, the mouse gets old like this. When you restore them, they get young again, right? This is a master switch. One of the things we're doing in functional medicine and longevity medicine is it feels like there's 1,000, 10,000 phenotypic expressions of this that we're trying to go after, right? But what if we could go after a couple of central things and then pick up the few things that were left over? I think this is the future. So I just told you about this. And I want to just jump forward because a little bit out of time. We saw David Sinclair paper about chemically induced reprogramming to reverse cellular aging. This is also fascinating. So these are the agents that were used: valproic acid, CHIR 99021, something called Repsox, cypramine, and forskolin, right? And they also use sodium butyrate, fibroblast growth factor, and alpha-ketoglutarate. So a lot of those things are foreign to you, but some of these mechanisms of action are the same as anti-cancer drugs. And in working with oncology, what we're seeing is that some people that are being treated for cancer are actually getting biologically younger. This is super exciting. So between going after the hypothalamic stem cells, which are now being done with transcranial echo to open up the blood-brain barrier and putting exosomes in to rejuvenate them, right? Central switch. To going after using chemicals to actually reboot the epigenetics. Now we're bypassing all the myriad of things that you feel like you have to climb Mount Everest to try to get young again. I call this cutting off the head of the cobra, right? Cutting off the head of the cobra. And I think this is where longevity is headed. You should also know that longevity research is accelerated. It's doubling. The amount of information on longevity is doubling every 3 months. If you map that out for 36 months, doubling, right? It's a greater than 4,000 time increase in what we know today. So here's what I think. I think everything that we are doing is going to work. I think we are actually going to crack the code on aging, particularly when you get down to the head of the cobra. I think everything we're doing is going to work. So I want you to imagine, this is the second part of the talk, and I'm down to 11 minutes, so we may run over. But you're now going to live young for a lifetime, right? And for some people, that's immortality. For some people, it's 300, 250, whatever it is. But let's say you're going to live young for a lifetime. I want to walk you through an exercise. I want you to close your eyes, and don't have to do it this second. I want you to close your eyes, and I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And you're going to close your eyes for about 30 seconds, and I want you to actually feel into your answer. Think about it, but also feel into your answer, okay? And then we'll go on to the next question. You can write down your answer, whatever. We don't have time for people to shout out their answers, but you'll go ahead and do that. And then I'll offer you some of the things that I've discovered around these things. So go ahead and close your eyes. And even those of you that don't want to close your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. Okay, here's the first question. To the best of your ability right now, what's the meaning of life? What's the meaning of life? Take 30 seconds and feel into that. Okay, 30 seconds became 15. Got your answer? All right, here's a second question. Close your eyes again. What's your life's purpose? Feel into what is your life's purpose, best as you understand it right now. What is your purpose? The third question, you can close your eyes again. And if all of life comes down to just one thing, what would that one thing be? What would that one thing be? Okay, you can open your eyes. Do you have your answers? Okay, great. We're a little short on time. I'd love to hear your answers. Maybe you can tell them to me afterwards. Let me offer you the answers that I've arrived at. So the first one, the meaning of life, I've done some really deep meditation dives, and I will tell you that there were some psychedelics involved in some of them, and psychedelics weren't involved in others, right? But I can tell you I've gotten in touch without psychedelics to some incredible insights about life itself. And when you connect to consciousness, right, there's been this debate, does the physical universe give rise to consciousness, or does consciousness give rise to the physical universe? Well, physics is now at a point where it's starting to actually believe that consciousness is giving rise to the physical universe. We don't have time to go into that in detail, but it has to do with quantum physics and the fact that things don't exist. Our thoughts are actually powerful and actually create reality, right? And so consciousness, just go with me here for a second. Consciousness precedes everything. Consciousness is pure love. Consciousness is pure love. Call it God, call it source. It's pure love. And what does pure love love to do? It loves to create. It loves to create. The universe is an expression of that, a creation that continues to perpetuate creation. And what does that do for consciousness? It creates tremendous joy. Tremendous joy. So you have love, creation, and joy. And for me, my life's purpose is basically to reside in that love, create from that space, and experience and spread the joy that comes from that. That's my purpose. And the one thing that I think we need to optimize is our nervous systems, right? When you think about it, what we think, what we believe is possible, what we believe is true, what we believe about ourselves, how we react, how we respond, how we move, all of it comes down to the nervous system. So that's the one thing for me to focus on. Now, the answer to question number 1 is your why. So as you think back to your answers, that's your why. Number 2 is your what, and number 3 is your how. So if you were wondering, like Natalie was, why would I want to live a long time? There you have your answer right there. Why, what, and how. Now, if we go back through the life energy circle quickly here, growth mindset. Let me touch on this. This is where you're married to your questions and not your current answers. So critical. We're going through life to actually collect answers. Like, now I figured out what I think about this, I figured out what party I belong to, I figured out this, I figured out this, figure out that. We think life is about going through and collecting answers. But in actual fact, all progress, all growth comes from asking the questions. So in my case, I was trained as a cardiologist, had a bunch of answers, I threw them all away and started getting married to the questions. It changed my life. If you start to hone in on the questions you're asking, it will change your life. All of a sudden, you'll have so much power to do things. Binary thinking. Binary thinking is basically ones and zeros. And when you look at all the conflict in the world, it's a function of binary thinking. This group's right, that group's wrong, right? Doesn't matter whether it's political, religious, cultural, it's all binary thinking. And yet in quantum computing, we know there's a +1, a -1, a 0 in the middle, and a sphere of all possibilities. And in quantum computing, the reason it's so powerful is it finds the right solution at this time for that problem. It's not locked into a binary thought process. When humans ascend to more quantum thinking, this is how we'll compete with AI. We need to become quantum thinkers. And doing the impossible. In my life, if you told me back in '88 when I moved to Texas that I was going to co-found a heart hospital, build a heart group with 10 offices, fly around in a little plane, I would have said, that's impossible. I have no idea how to do any of that. If you told me while we're building the heart hospital, you're going to leave cardiology altogether, you're actually going to go into longevity medicine, you're going to build an amazing clinic, and you're going to take it global, I would have said, that's impossible. I have no idea how to do that. And so I've come to realize if I'm not trying to do the impossible, I'm not thinking big enough. And I think if you're going to live here a long time, if you're going to be here a long time and you're going to be youthful, you should reframe. What is it that you're here to do? I think the impossible is possible for you too. So optimizing mental health. This really comes down to healing trauma. So much anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, right? And I don't know anybody that hasn't suffered trauma. Certainly I have, certainly you have. And what I've found is that if you go deep into the trauma and understand what actually happened, who did what your role was, you dissect it out, and then you actually heal it by forgiving. You can actually get to a place where you no longer hold a grudge. And then from there, you can move into a place of transcendence, where now all of a sudden you're actually thankful and grateful for everything that ever happened, because it made you wiser. It's brought you to this point here today. It's enabled you to do things you wouldn't have otherwise been able to. And when you look at life through that lens that I'm grateful for everything, it heals the trauma. Feeling loved, unconditional self-love, lack of flagellation. Love is infinite. It's an economy of abundance. And I never felt unconditional love till my first son was born. It was like, oh my gosh, I've never felt love like this before, ever. I never got that as a kid. I never felt that. It's like I went back and gave that to myself from a maternal position or a paternal position, my big self. It's like, wow, I have unconditional love. I feel great. This is wonderful. You can do that too. And then optimizing relationships. What's the definition of a great relationship? For me, it's knowing and being known and loving and being loved, right? And that takes courageous conversations, the willingness to be vulnerable, the willingness to open up, to say, you know what, it's that kind of conversation where you feel like, I'm not sure I'm even going to say this, but I'm going to say it. This may destroy the relationship, but I have to tell you what's on my heart. And when somebody's willing to hear that and come back the other way, you build such intimacy. It's unbelievable. And then you have to understand that language is a limited form of communication, right? We're dribbling out words. When in actual fact, many things can be true at once. We can love something and hate something simultaneously. And yet when we say one word, it's hard to convey that. So in conversation, it's like, oh, tell me more about that. I need to understand that better. I think you're saying this. Did I get that right? It's the same kind of language that a therapist might use, but it's incredibly useful in conversation. And then understanding forgiveness, how we basically, instead of holding up an energetic wall against someone, we let it down and just let unconditional positive regard flow again. So feeling joy, it's my North Star. Love, creation, joy. If I'm not feeling joy, then I'm not in my sweet spot. Optimizing spiritual health, right? Huge. Meditation, breath work, connection, psychedelics, and what's science's role? You know, people come up to me and they say, well, I hear you talking about this, but I believe in science. I'm like, oh, really? Tell me about that. I need to understand that better. I believe in science. You know, science is simply a construct. It's basically a man-made construct that's essentially trying to explain what is and predict what's going to happen. That's all it is, right? And it's never adequately done either. So to believe in science is not to believe in reality. It's like saying, you know, we're going to talk about love, and that's love. That's not love. Love's an experience, right? Love's an experience. So just keep that in mind. And then feeling worthy, not having guilt or shame, self-limiting beliefs, and making wise decisions that are good for you and everybody on the planet. And then this is really critical, feeling safe. I think all anxiety, all worry, all fear, all anger, all stress, and all greed devolves down to not feeling safe. If you ask yourself when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling worried or you're feeling something, what is it about this situation that's not making me feel safe? Right? If you can solve that problem, just like giving yourself unconditional love is an inside job, giving yourself safety is an inside job. Nothing external to you can ever make you feel safe. No amount of money, I don't care where you went to school, I don't care who your family is, I don't care what position you have. All of that, history shows us, can be taken away in an instant. It's an inside job. How do you feel safe? When you give yourself safety and you give yourself love and you're connected to source, it's like, oh, well, that's an interesting situation, but I'm not worried about it. I'm not anxious about it, right? And then feeling this energetic resonance with the universe, this greater sense of purpose. So this comes from this loving space, creating joy, sharing joy. And then we get back to this. So 30-year-old body, yes, that's my target. 3,000-year-old mind. That's my real target. This is the book, 100 is the New 30. And it's been such an honor and a privilege to have this time to chat with you. Thank you so much.